I am so excited that we have Eva Longoria here. She is an award-winning actress, producer, director, and activist, and I am so thrilled to have her here to talk today about all of this and so much more. So with that, I would like to bring out Eva.
What's up, Texas? What's up, Texas? Hi. Wow, what a big room.
Thank you so much for joining all of us today to talk about your career and your feature debut, Flamin Hot.
Thank you.
But because we are at South by Southwest in Austin, I think it's very important to begin with a mention that you are a native Texan.
Yes.
Yeah. Growing up here, did you always know that you wanted to be in entertainment?
Oh, God, no. No. You know, I'm 112 years old, so I come from a family of educators. So my mom's a teacher. Yes, teachers! Underpaid, underappreciated. And my aunts were teachers, my sisters are, you know, engineers, so I was the disappointment in the family by becoming an actor. No, it was one day I went to college and I graduated college and I was in a pageant. I couldn't afford my senior year in college. It was like my financial aid ran out. They stopped Pell Grants at the time. And a friend of mine said, you should enter the scholarship pageant. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, it's like a beauty pageant. I was like, oh God, no. Because I grew up, I know it's hard to believe now, but I grew up as the ugly duckling in my family. What in Mexican household is called La Prieta Fea, the ugly dark one. And I know, and that was my mom. And so I didn't grow up with this idea of beauty. Like in my family, it was very important to be the smart one. And there was like a competition in my family to be the smartest one. And so anyway, I entered this pageant. And in the pageant, if you won, you got like tuition and books and a stipend. And second place was like tuition, and then third place was like that. So I calculated if I could get fourth place, I would get my books paid for. And then I was gonna like hodgepodge the rest of, okay, I could take 2 classes. I could afford 2 classes or whatever. So my aim was pretty low. It was like fourth place. And then I remember there was 5 of us as finalists, and one of the questions was, what do you think about cloning? Remember when they cloned that sheep Daisy? What was her name? Dolly. And the girl next to me, she goes, what the fuck is cloning? And I go, well, I beat this one. I mean, I beat her. Because I know.
Fourth, here we come.
I got 4th place for sure. And then, but I ended up winning it, and in this prize package was a trip to Hollywood. Yeah, and I was like, oh, I don't want to keep doing this beauty thing. I needed the money to finish college, and so I ended up taking that trip after graduation, and then just one day was like, I think I'm going to be an actor, like that, like one day. Never thought of it, didn't know how to do it, had $22 in my bank account, and I stayed in LA. I just never came home. Yeah. It's weird.
I've heard a lot of origin stories, and not a one has mentioned Dolly the sheep, I have to say, and I'm so happy. You decided that you are going to be an actress, but as you mentioned, no one in your family is in entertainment. When you got to Hollywood, there's obviously obstacles that you're anticipating. What were some of the obstacles that you came across that maybe you weren't anticipating?
That I wasn't Latin enough. That was weird because I didn't grow up speaking Spanish, but I looked like this. And so I got to Hollywood and I would go for the Latina roles, and they were like, could you do it with an accent? And I was like, well, I don't have an accent. And then I would be like, you mean, they would be like Rosie Perez, that's what they always said, who's like a New York, you know, very specific dialect. And I was like, I can't do that accent. And then I would go for Spanish-speaking stuff, and I didn't speak Spanish, but I was like, I could memorize it. And I remember auditioning, and then the casting director goes, "You don't speak Spanish, do you?" I was like, "No." So I got a lot of Italian roles, and I was like, "Done, Eva Longoria." I was like, "Yeah, yes, I'm Italian." Yeah. And so that was odd, and it was such a division in a box. You had to be in this box or that box, and there wasn't a lot of gray back then in 1929. Yeah.
Your breakout came with Desperate Housewives. Yeah. Give it up for Desperate Housewives. And I know that you have actually referenced the show as being your film school.
Yes.
I am wondering, what did you learn on that set that you then carried forward with you into your career behind the camera?
Yeah, everything. You know, it was a decade of my life. So being on set of one of the biggest shows in television, it was an amazing film school. And I was so curious. I always asked questions. I always was like, what is that? What is that? What does that do? What do you mean changing the lens? What is checking the gate? Why do I have to stand here? What's a boom? And they were like, Eva's on set again. Because I was so annoyingly curious. And then we used to shoot Desperate Housewives on film. We were one of the last shows that changed to digital. And so they would let me load the camera, and it was just a fun time to learn. And in TV, we used to do 24 episodes a year per season. Now you get like 6 episodes per TV series, and so 24 episodes a year. We had 24 directors come through. Each episode is by a different director, and so I got to really do a case study. I'm like, what is the hardest thing for you as a director? And they go, and I would just ask every director that came through questions and advice, and that was super helpful as well.
To you, what makes a good director?
A good communicator. Yeah, a kind communicator as well. I think, being clear with your vision is important, but sometimes you get, directors that are super clear and they don't let anybody in on that vision or anybody in to help. I also, for me, and every director is different, but for me, it's best idea wins. Like, it's not just my idea, but like, that's why you have these amazing department heads, and that's why you hire with that lens of, do you want to make the same movie as me? And if you do, we're probably going to agree on mostly everything. But it's great when somebody doesn't and bumps up against you in a positive way of like, did you ever think of this? Is there any value in doing it this way? And you're like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. And to every job, I remember directing telenovela, which was a comedy, and in the script was, Ana Sofia walks in with a coffee. That's all it said. And the prop guy came to me and he goes, Eva, so this coffee. And we had like a 20-minute conversation. I was like, it's a coffee, Bob. I don't know, what do you want me to? He's like, is it like a to-go cup, like Starbucks thing, or would she have like her own to-go cup, like a thermos? Would she have a mug, like maybe she got coffee from the break room? He had so many questions about this one thing that said, Sophia walks in with coffee. And he had all this stuff to show me, and I was like, I don't know. And then he goes, I was thinking about this, and he pulled out a mug with my face on it, my character's face on it, and I started laughing so hard, and it was a comedy, and I said, he just put a joke where there wasn't a joke, in the best way. And I didn't pay attention to that. I was like, I don't know, Bob, it's a coffee mug, what? I don't know. And he's like, what do you think of this? And I was like, I love it. And so we did an insert, and we started on my face to my face as if, yeah, she would have a picture of herself every day. It was character, yes to Bob, props. But it's those ideas, But I remember specifically with Flamin Hot, when I was crewing up, the first person you do is a DP. And my DP, Federico Cantini, he's here. Say hi, Federico. He's amazing. I interviewed so many. Like, I sat with a lot of them. And Searchlight, because this movie's for Searchlight, they're a very prestigious company. They have access to some amazing cinematographers. So I had great meetings, but none of them wanted to make the movie I was making. They had great ideas, and I was like, oh yeah, like what about this? And why don't we do it in black and white? I was like, oh, okay, maybe no. And so when Fede came in, he had first of all read the script like in an hour, which was amazing, and he called me when he's like, I have to do this movie. I have to be the one to do this with you. This is what I'm thinking. And every example, reference, shot was almost, it was probably in my, if not in my presentation, in my head. Like I had already presented to Searchlight, and he's like, what about this? I was like, that's in my presentation. And then he's like, and then I was thinking this. I was like, that's my reference. And so because of that, each department head had to kind of be that, want to make the same movie you're making. And that's important.
Every little thing matters.
Every little thing matters. Yeah. The other beautiful thing when I hired all my department heads was our production designers. We had two, Brandon Mendez and Cabot McMullen. But when Brandon presented, he used a lot of pictures from his childhood, from his neighborhood, from his he didn't have to go far. Like he was like, yeah, this is a world I know. Look, this is my dad. Da da da. Where our costume designer, Elaine Montalvo, amazing woman, in her deck, in her presentation to me, all photos of her family, her dad, her cousins. She didn't have to go far to know the costumes of the movie. So there was such an authenticity and connection that every department had to this story that I was like, that's the person.
How much of a difference does that make when you have a crew that has the lived experience that your crew had when it came to creating an authentic story like you have in Flamin' Hot?
For me, it was at the forefront of what I was looking for. My North Star for this movie, one, because it's a biopic, it's about a guy. This stuff really happened. But because of that, but also my North Star was authenticity. Like I was like, it has to be authentic. I know y'all haven't seen the movie, but there's a lot of scenes with food, obviously. And there's a scene where Emilio, this character's putting tapatio on his spaghetti, and I'm like, we do that. Mexicans do that. We put tapatio on everything, basically. And then there was just all these little cultural specificities that I think only we would know, or the writer would know. Linda Chavez, who wrote the script, Chicana, from Los Angeles, brilliant. She has the rhythm of the dialogue. The way she talks is the way Richard talks. Like we all have this rhythm in the way we speak, and so it was it was super important because if it's not on the script, it's very hard to manufacture that, and then you feel it manufactured, in a movie.
Taking a step back, post Desperate Housewives, when that massive show ended, how did you choose what was the next step in your career, having gained this incredible understanding of behind the camera work? Did you know immediately that you wanted to take a step into producing in that side of filmmaking? Yeah,
I was always a director-producer first that fell into acting. Like when I got to Hollywood, I was an extra for 2 years. And I was the same annoying person then, which was, I was like, what is that? What does that do? What is that? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, somebody take this extra back to holding. She's escaped again. And I would want to ask everything. And I always wanted to know who those people were behind the monitors. I was like, who are those people? And they're like, oh, those are the producers. And I was like, well, seems like they're the bosses. So then I was like, I want to be that person. I want to tell people what to do. Yeah. And I'm really good at it. And so then I fell into acting. Like I got a role in Young and the Restless, and then I was pursuing acting, but I really always was fascinated with behind the camera. And then I remember on Desperate Housewives too, I would go in, I would stand on a mark, I would say my lines, and I would go home. I didn't choose the take that I wanted. I didn't get to pick my co-star. I didn't get to edit this scene. I didn't get to do anything. And I also felt like I wasn't reaching my full potential as a human. Like I was on set, and I was I was restless. I wanted to do more. And so once I started directing, I started in TV. I've been directing TV for 12 years. And it's crazy because you kind of keep your head down and your feet moving, and then one day you look up and you're like, oh my God, I've been directing a decade. But it is all those combined experiences that made me ready for this. And I never set out to do a feature film. I wasn't like, now the next step is a feature film. Like, I didn't find this script. This script found me. Like, it landed divinely in my orbit, and I was like, I need to do this movie. Like, oh my God, I was so blown away by the story. But for the most part, yeah, I love the medium of television, and I loved, my experience. Like, I really touched every rung of the ladder in TV. Like, I started with 2 short films, and then I did half hour and multicam and 1 hour and single cam, and then I did pilots, and then so I felt like I know everybody's job, and I know every facet of television, and it just felt like when this Flaming Hot script came along, I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
When you were making that jump to behind the camera, was the greater industry, the greater ecosystem willing to let you do that because you had been known for so long as an actress, and Hollywood tends to keep people, where they are in boxes? Did you receive any pushback or any questions?
Yeah, I think the 2 biggest hurdles I had to overcome was being an actor, because back then it wasn't as common. Like, I remember, like, George Clooney started directing and Angelina Jolie did one thing, but it wasn't as common as it is now, where, there's Olivia Wilde, and there's a lot of people are actor-directors. Jon Favreau. So back then, you had to overcome the hurdle of, like, you're a dumb actor, because most actors are dumb. I know. I'm just kidding. None in my movie. They're all amazing. But I did, because they're like, oh, here comes the actor. They think they know how to direct. So it was that of, like, I had to work really hard to gain the trust, mostly of DPs that you work with in TV, because they also, like, a leapfrog a DP, or you just get the DP that's there. Like, you don't get to pick, and you're on TV. You're going onto their set, into their work. You're just the visiting person. And so it was that, and then the second biggest hurdle was being a woman. I mean, there's a lot of systemic sexism that still exists behind the camera for female directors. Because people always go, oh, I wonder why there's not more female directors. I'm like, the talent is there. It's definitely difficult, because I've had many DPs like question me and, well, are you sure you want to do that? Yes, I want to do that. Are you sure you want to put the camera there? Yes, I would. Could you please put the camera there? And so that was tough. Now it's less so, because I have a body of work that they go, oh, okay, she kind of knows what she's doing. And the biggest thing, every time I would finish an episode of TV, the DP goes, wow, you really know what you're doing. And I would be like, thank you. Like, I didn't know how to take it, but I was like, yes, thank you, I appreciate that. But it was still kind of a hurdle for a lot of women.
Yeah, and just a waste of time.
Yeah.
It sounds.
I don't have time to explain to you why I'm right.
And I know you mentioned, Flamin' Hot coming into your orbit, but what was it exactly about Richard's story that you're like, I need to be the person to tell this story on screen? Yeah,
so many facets of it. First of all, that he was Mexican American like me. I'm a Texican, and so yes, I'm a Texican. And when I moved to Los Angeles, this word Chicano and, like, Mexican Americanism was very different than how we grew up as Texans, even though we're both Mexican American. But I grew up straddling that hyphen. Like, I sit right in between being Mexican and American, and you don't get to really choose one side. Like, I was both. I'm both at all times. And yes, thank you. And it's a beautiful thing. And so my agent had sent me the script, and she was like, you're never gonna get this, but you should read it. And she's like, I don't mean that like, she didn't believe in me. She was just like, there was a lot of directors that wanted to tell this story. And I was like, oh, let me read it. And when I read it, it was an okay script at the time, and I cried 4 times. Like, I was like, whoa, I can't believe this man exists, and he's Mexican American, and I don't know it, and I'm an activist, and I know everything in the Mexican American community, and I didn't know his story, and I thought that's such a shame. Like everybody should know this story. It's so inspirational. It's so beautiful, and it's beautiful. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And once I read it and I had the opportunity to go into Searchlight and pitch, I worked really hard. I mean, really hard on the pitch and what I wanted the movie to be and what I knew the movie could be. And tonally, I mean, you've seen it, so it's very cool. It's very fun, and it has a lot of heart, but it's a lot of humor. And so I was like, it needs to be this, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be that, da, da, da. And then I got the job, which was fun. Yes.
I am wondering, because Hollywood loves a comp. They love hearing that something is like something else.
Yes,
But this movie is so singular, especially in terms of representation. There aren't a lot of Mexican-American stories on screen. There are not a lot of Latino stories on screen, period. When you were, pitching to the studio and saying, we would like it to be like this, we would like it to be like this, what were you referencing?
Oh, yeah. A lot. I actually pulled in a lot of references because because it's a biopic, it could be very formulaic, right? Like this happened, everything lives and dies on the vine of this person's life. And so you already have a natural outline. So I wanted to delineate that. I wanted to make it fun. Also, the entire movie I put in Richard's POV because this is his story we're telling, so we're never not in Richard's mind. And with that, Richard will tell you this himself, he's the most uneducated, smartest guy you'll meet. He says, vato. And yes, and he's right, because you sit with him and you go, yeah, he's not educated, but wow, is he smart. And so to show that, the only way we could do it is by being in his voice all the time. So if you look at movies that have strong POVs, of course Scorsese's like a genius at it, and probably more contemporary is Adam McKay. So I was really like, I love the journalistic approach of Adam McKay. I didn't want to break the fourth wall, or I didn't want to do any of that stuff. And Adam McKay does it a little too fast sometimes. But if you can tell a movie about the housing market crash and make it interesting, I was like, this guy knows how to tell stories. But then also Scorsese I loved, but like not as lyrical, and he takes he takes a lot of time to tell that story. And so I wanted to be somewhere in between, just because those two directors have such a strong POV. And then when I talked cinematically, like what is it going to look like? I'm obviously a huge fan of Spielberg, who's not? But like if you look at his movies, just his composition, like he does a lot of one-ers, but he hides a lot of coverage in his one-ers, so it's not really a one-er, because you do have the close-up that you need, and you do have the two-shot that you need, and you're like, wow. And so we studied a lot of his work in that, and then I drew a lot from animation. Like I was like, in Rio, so they start wide, and then they start with this music that sets the tone, and you go, oh, Brazilian. Or if you watch Moana, and you go, oh, got it. Like they immediately set the table for that stuff. And so it was a lot of that. And then going back to Adam McKay too, he set the table a lot for the issue he was talking about, whether it was climate change and Don't Look Up, or the housing crisis, or in Vice, what was happening in the country. And I thought, oh, okay, I need to set the table, because we do talk about the Chicano movement, and there's a baby montage in the movie about people don't understand, being Latino, we're not black and we're not white, we're like in between. We're a class apart from everybody else. And so, we do have discrimination against us in our community. And so to kind of like explain that was happening in the 60s, police brutality, getting shipped off to war, not getting hired because of the color of our skin, that all happened to Mexican Americans in the Chicano movement. And so I was like, how do I set the movie but not have it be medicine for people who are going to watch it? And also not alienate anybody who's watching it. And so we do it in a really clever way in the film, a la Adam McKay. And we're like, oh, how would this montage look? And how do we, like, just like, okay, just so you understand, this is what was happening at this time, and this is why this happened. Okay, and we move on, you know? It's not a history lesson, and it's not, you know, difficult to digest. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. And so many people who watch the movie who are non-Hispanic, they're like, I never knew that was happening. And you're like, yeah, that was happening, which produces a certain kind of person like Richard, right?
Yeah, something can be interesting and expository at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So those were there's a lot of there was a lot more comps. Also, Crazy Rich Asians was a comp in the sense of how it was record-breaking for Asian Americans to come out to see that movie. It was like 38%. I can't remember what the percentage was. But if you look at the majority of people who watched that movie, they were people who wanted a rom-com, right? And so I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to make this movie about our community, but I want to make it for everybody. And I think we did it really well.
It was one of the things that when I was speaking to my colleagues after watching it, I was like, this movie isn't made that much anymore, and it's so wonderful, like the rom-com, to have it back. And
Yeah.
you don't realize how much you miss it until you're confronted with it again.
Yeah.
You're like, man, I missed this so much. There's such a wonderful scene in the movie, and it's not a spoiler or anything, but there's this scene where Richard is pitching to the Frito-Lay executives, and he points out that there is a massive Latino market that they are ignoring with their products. And watching it, what struck me about this is it could be an exact pitch to studio executives as well. There's a couple of numbers that get thrown around a lot, and the MPAA puts out a state of movie-going survey, and the last one was in 2020, and it was that Latinos made up 19% of the American population, but make up 29% of the ticket buyers in the US. Yeah. And they only make up 5.7% of on-screen characters. And that's not even talking on-screen characters.
Yeah, that's like anybody who has a line.
Yes.
It's not like a lead.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know you are incredibly familiar with these numbers because you have been at the forefront of pushing for representation on screen. I am wondering, what do you want Hollywood to understand and to know that they are still not getting about Latino representation and what they are leaving behind?
Yeah, I mean, it's so disappointing. I think people think Hollywood is progressive. Like, you're like, oh, it's super progressive, and it's not. When you look at the statistics like that, we actually went down. I think it was we were 7% in TV and film. In 2020, it was 5%. So it was like, same thing with female directors. We were more the year before, there was more female directors, and it went down. And you're like, whoa, what's happening? We're going in the wrong direction. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's important. You know why it's important to see representation on film and TV is because it educates communities about who we are. So if you don't have a Latino in your community, you're going to assume it's only what you see on the news or on your Twitter feed, or, you know, all of the bad images, or Narcos, you know, like, you go, okay, well, that's who they are. So it's important that we educate other communities on, no, we're so much more. The flip side of that, exactly, the flip side of that is it educates our own communities about who we are. And that's more important. If our own Latino community can't look up at the screen or in TV and see themselves reflected back, they assume I can't be that. If I can't see it, I can't be it, right? And that's what drew me to Richard's story too, was, you know, Hollywood dictates what heroes look like. And there's never been a hero who looks like Richard Montañez. And I was like, I want to create a hero for everybody, by the way, because there's not a lot of heroes, much less in corporate America, and a company as big as PepsiCo and as big as Frito-Lay, to see what this man did within that company as a Mexican janitor. Like, the opportunity that he created for himself was really revolutionary and impressive and inspiring. But I go, oh, I have an opportunity to create what a hero looks like, so I want him to look brown.
I want to speak to casting that hero. Yeah, I'm hoping you can take me through the casting process because we've talked about authenticity behind the camera, but authenticity in front of the camera is also incredibly important to you and present in this movie. So can you take us through finding your Richard?
Yeah, it was a search. We saw everybody. Again, because it's a biopic, we wanted Mexican American because Richard is Mexican American. We did see all Latino actors in general, but for the most part, again, my North Star being authenticity. I wanted all the roles to be Mexican American because that's the story. His whole family, his father, the wife, the neighborhood, his buddies, everybody had to be from a certain community. And once Jesse came in, it was like he just blew us away because this was a very hard role to cast. Because of the script that Linda wrote and with my vision of like, it's got to have heart, but it's got to be funny and it's got to be grounded, but it's got to be light and it's got to be, and so the actor had to do comedy, he had to do drama, and because Richard was a gangbanger in his life, like he had to have that dangerous kind of side to him that could erupt any time. But he was so funny. Like Richard's so funny in life, and he has this like optimistic outlook on life. After you see like Richard shouldn't be alive, much less successful with what he went through in his life. And so to find an actor who could do comedy, who could do drama, and then who could be vulnerable with Judy, his wife, in the film, it was very difficult because some people did the comedy really well, and some actors did the drama and the cholo really well, and then others. But Jesse kind of brought it all together. And when you watch the movie, you're gonna fall in love with Jesse Garcia. He's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
I will co-sign that. I
Yes.
did.
Didn't you fall in love with him? Yeah.
Amazing.
If you're not rooting for him, you have no heart. Yeah.
You're not paying attention.
You're not paying attention.
An interesting thing happened right before this movie began filming where the LA Times published a story about the origins of the Flamin Hot Cheeto, and they had a statement from Frito-Lay which said that they do not consider Richard to be the creator of the Flamin' Hot Cheeto. Richard disputed these statements and also added, I don't know what was going on in other parts of the country, the other divisions. I don't know what they were doing. All I can tell you is what I did. All I have is my history and what I did in my kitchen. How do you, and did you ultimately, as a filmmaker and a creative and the leader of this movie, navigate a situation like that?
Yeah, it was. It's interesting because it didn't affect our script at all, really. I mean, our story's always been about Richard Montañez. We have never set out to tell the history of the Cheeto. I don't know if you guys would show up for that movie. This is the history of Richard Montañez, which happened to have a really big hand in the launch of this product. Richard's genius, he's not a food chemist, and so we never said that in the movie, we don't say that in the movie, we never said he mixes maltodextrin with whatever else is in there. We don't say it. His genius was saying nobody's paying attention to the Hispanic market. We put chile on chips. He did come up with a recipe. He did come up with a slurry in his kitchen. Him and his wife have so many, wonderful memories of that. And so again, he was like, all I know is what I did in my kitchen. We don't say that. We even say in the movie they don't use his, recipe. We're like, his genius and what Enrico really championed. Roger Enrico was the CEO of Pepsi at the time. And what he championed and what he knew was that Richard was a visionary with the Hispanic market. And that's why he's known as like the godfather of Hispanic marketing. Because he was like, there's a whole segment of us that nobody's paying attention to. And I think if we maybe do products specific for my community, I know how to get it out there. I know how to do it. And that's why the climax of the movie is not Richard making a recipe. The climax of the movie is how he launched this product and stood behind it and really made it successful. And he was with Pepsi 42 years. 42 years, moved his way up, and really is celebrated for that success in the company. He's in training videos, and he's flown all over the country and told his story many, many a times in the last 40 years.
I always think that directors and people in IT have the commonality is they're both very good at troubleshooting. They are constant problem solvers. So one of my favorite questions to ask filmmakers is, what was one obstacle or moment on set or shot or sequence that was giving you a lot of difficulty and that you eventually had to overcome and figure out?
Yeah, well, we were lucky that we had a shoot where we did all of our house and exterior and community stuff at the first half, and the second half of filming was in the factory. Mostly because it wasn't finished when we started shooting, so we're like, we have to put that at the end. But once we were in the factory, we were in the factory. We were in the factory for the rest of the movie, and there was one scene we kept punting, which was the time lapse of 10 years. And I wanted to do something creative, and I was like, okay, how do we show 10 years have passed other than a chyron of 10 years have passed? Because it was a very important time. It was like Reaganomics, factories were shutting down. A lot of stuff happened in that time that he was at the factory. So to get out that information, but also visually somehow fast forward in time. And so we kept punting it. We're like, oh, scene 72 is today. No, let's do it tomorrow. Oh, okay. No, let's do it Monday. No, let's do it Friday. And finally, Fede kept showing me these things. He had a whole group chain of other DPs, and he would send them. He's like, "What do you guys think?" Again, best idea wins. And finally, we settled on what we did, which I loved the movie yesterday. They do all these graphics, really cool graphics that were like with the Beatles songs, and when they cross the street, and when he's trying to come up with the words. And so I kept showing Fede, my DP, that, and I was like, I want to do this. And then he showed me something. He's like, we should do it like this. And then we talked to our VFX people. And we were like, okay, if we do this, what could you do? And it was like a whole brains, our brains hurt trying to figure out what was possible. Because we could do anything. But I was like, well, it has to be special. And so I'm really proud of that particular sequence, because Richard is a janitor, and then 10 years pass, and you land on him, and he's a janitor, and almost like, time, everything has moved on except him. And it was pretty creative.
It's incredibly affecting.
Yeah, it's great, right? Yeah, I'm proud of that one. But that was like a headache. Yeah. And then also the building of the factory. I mean, the building, I
didn't realize that was a build out.
It was a build out, yeah, a big build out. And I kept saying, Searchlight's like, this is the budget. I'm like, why is it so expensive? They're like, you're building a factory. I was like, oh, is that expensive? That costs money? But we found this amazing old newspaper journal from the 80s. So it was like period specific. And but anything you see on the floor, we built. And so our production designers, Cabot and Brandon, really, I mean, we watched potato chip making videos till our eyes bled. Like, I could make a Cheeto at this point. It's a tumbler, and then there's an extruder, and then there's this cooling, and then it has like a bucket. And so we kept like playing with this model that they made, and Fede and I would like play with it. And we wanted it to be a little modular where, if we could clear this out, we do a different scene here. And then because we were in 3 different time zones, 70s, 80s, and 90s, if you look at factories today, they're all mechanized. There's like barely any people that make these. But back in the 80s, they hand packaged the Cheetos and they hand packaged the Doritos and all that stuff. But when Richard came, he was blown away. He was like, it feels like you could make potato chips here. And I was like, yes, right? Like, that's how authentic we made that factory build out. And so I was really proud of it. Really, really proud of it. And then when you see, and we had some people who are familiar with the process and that watched it, and they were like, how did you do that? And we were like, no, 90% of it was functional. Sometimes we CGI'd what was on the, conveyor belt sometimes, but even that, for the most part, there was just Cheetos everywhere for a month on the floor because we constantly had to put them through these machines.
Everyone from the cast and crew is still finding Cheeto dust
in
various corners of their
everywhere.
homes.
Exactly.
This movie is premiering here, and then will be out later this year. I'm wondering, with it finally coming out after all of this work, what do you hope audiences take away from it, and what do you hope Hollywood takes away from it?
Wow. Yeah, it's so funny because when we were thinking about festivals, there's like industry-facing festivals and public-facing festivals, and they were like, which one do you want? I was like, both. Both, because if we're going to move the needle, we have to be industry facing. We have to show execs and other people and other studios that this will work. You know, these stories can come from different communities and still be compelling and inspirational and complex. And so it's important that you know, we have a presence and a splash in the industry. But public facing, you know, I really want people to walk out of this movie feeling a certain way. And so I do that a lot with, even every time I approached a scene, I would tell Fede, I want this scene to feel intimate. And then he would go, oh, okay. And then he'd figure out the lighting and he'd do the camera. And then I would be like, okay, this scene has to feel contentious. Like, I should feel how tense it is in this room. And he'd be like, oh, okay. So I lead with that. So when I was like, I want to make a film that feels good when you leave, that you can watch with your whole family and leave and you all keep talking about it. And you keep talking about a conversation about what's possible in your life. Because thematically, I explored, you know, how opportunity is not distributed equally. And so when that happens and you're like, oh, I know I can do it, but nobody's giving me the chance, or I know I can do it, but people go, oh, that's not for people like you, or that's not for little girls, don't do that, or that's not for, you know, that you go, well, why not? But why not? Why not me? Why can't an idea come from somebody like me? And so that's how I want you to feel when you walk out of the movie, is you're like, yeah, why not me? And you go and invent something like Flamin Hot Cheetos.
I can't wait for other people to see this movie because I'm so excited to talk about it. I hope you all see this movie, and lucky for everyone here, right before our audience Q&A, we actually have a clip, and this is an exclusive to South by because a trailer has not been out yet. So this is a very first look at Flamin' Hot.
Burns good or burns bad?
It burns good.
Oh! Oh, we did it! Oh, yeah!
Of course we did! It burns good. I feel like Texans know that. It burns good, yeah. We know what that means.
I know you mentioned actually during that clip the music. Yes. So before we jump into some questions from the audience, this movie, the soundscape of this movie is so wonderful and carries the story along. So I'm wondering, just before audience questions, is there anything you wanted to mention?
Oh, just our composer was amazing. And it's amazing how much music really changes things and scenes and your feeling. And so we had an amazing composer, Marcelo, who wanted, you know, we wanted the scale and scope of like a Gladiator soundtrack, right? Like literally, you remember Slumdog Millionaire, like that soundtrack, and each character had a theme song technically. And so anytime Richard was on, you know, he's like, we should bring it in this way but different, and we should bring it in this way but different. So it was really wonderful to work with him. And we have a lot of needle drops, so we have a lot of music that we had to buy for the movie too, that I'm super proud of as well, that just set the scene so amazing for what's happening in the scene. I was like, I need that song, and Searchlight would be like, that is a very expensive song. I was like, I know, but we need it. So it's a really good balance between, you're like, I know those songs, and the score just pushing you through. And it also moves. There's a lot of pace to the movie. It's 90 minutes, but it's like there's so much pace, and that's the music. The music pushes you to the next scene, and it pushes you to the next scene, and so it's beautifully done by Marcelo.
And what's a song when you've already built a factory? So, you know.
I know. Also, our theme song, or the main song of the movie, is sung by Becky G. Yeah. So I can't wait for y'all to hear it.
And we have some questions from the audience now. This first one is, how was your identity as a Latin woman shaped the way you navigate a white industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about this. Juju, Nieto, where are you? You here? It's, you know, you have to create your own lane. And I think what's happening with content creation, with all the platforms and the streamers and the studios and the networks and whatever it is this need for content is forcing these studios and decision makers to tap a different well of talent, right? Like they can't always go back to the same guy to write the same story. And so that is a beautiful thing for the Latino community is we have an amazing well of talent. We have a very big untapped talent pool, amazing writers, amazing directors, amazing producers that haven't had the opportunity. And so I think the way in which we consume content is changing the way in which gatekeepers are deciding who to use and what stories to tell. I also think it's keeping our foot on the gas. Like I said, if you look at that statistic you said, we were 7% the year before in TV and film, now we're 5% because we let our foot off the gas. We're like, oh, we're having gains. So we just can't do that. We have to keep our foot on the gas with making sure that our stories are being told. Mm-hmm.
A question from Daniela Rodriguez Marti. What medium have you not explored behind or in front of the camera that you want to try?
I am such a fan of musicals. Like I'm a huge Baz Luhrmann fan. I mean, because there's so many amazing stories. The Rita Hayworth story is amazing. She was Latina. People don't know that. There's a beautiful story about the Copa that I read. There's a beautiful story. Like, there's all these beautiful Latin and music from the Latin community is like the heartbeat of the world. Who knows Bad Bunny? And so for me, like I would love to tackle a musical one day. I'm not ready, but yeah, that would be a genre that I would love. I would like to do a scary movie, but I'm so scared. I don't think I could do it.
Couldn't watch it.
I wouldn't be able to watch it.
Couldn't watch it.
I wouldn't be able to edit it. I would be like, oh God, no. So no, but it would probably be a musical.
There is a question from Shailana Basin. Which project that you've worked on, regardless of its success, has meant the most to you?
Flaming Hot. Flaming Hot. It's been an amazing experience from beginning to end. From my producer, Devon Franklin, who is the biggest, ride or die person you could have on your team. I was so lucky to have him champion me to get the job and then to keep the job and to, finish the job. Like he just really supported every decision that I wanted, and that's rare because you could have a really horrible producer and you're just doing this the whole time and you're like, you're supposed to help me. So he was amazing, and then again for all the department heads that I hired, to the editors that we use, to the post production and all of this, to now kicking this off South by Southwest, to like marketing, publicity, digital. Like now it's like a whole, like I keep having different families with the movie, and so this definitely means the most to me. And I've been reading scripts because we shot this 2 years ago. Has it been 2 years? And everybody's like, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? And I haven't felt the way I felt when I read Flaming Hot, where I said, I am the only person who can do this. I have to do this film. I will die if I don't direct this film. I have to do it. And so I've been reading things and I don't feel that way about anything else. And I was asking my agent, I was like, do I have to feel that way every time? Is there sometimes you don't feel that way? She's like, no, you should feel that way every time you direct something. Yeah.
A question from Sarah Vasquez. How do you tap into and embrace your femininity in leading and directing in the film?
Well, I am feminine. I'm a girl's girl. I grew up with a bunch of women. So I don't, that's an interesting question because I think when we arrive at a certain place, whether it's in corporate America, any industry you're at, when you arrive at a certain stature, you feel like I've got to man up. I gotta be a man. I gotta act like a man. I gotta be manly, and specifically on a set where 80% of your crew is men. I don't bend to that. I love being a woman, and I love everything that comes with that. And so I don't think you should compromise your femininity to fit into being a director or being a producer or being a leader, right? Like why is leader associated with masculinity? I think the best leaders in many industries are women. We're multitaskers, we're problem solvers, we wear many hats at the same time. Like we are natural leaders. And so I would lean into your femininity.
a question from Cindy McCrossan. What do you like best about filming in Albuquerque? P.S. Albuquerque loves you.
Oh, I love Albuquerque. I'm actually going back. We shot in Albuquerque. Albuquerque was amazing because, again, this is a biopic which happened in the Los Angeles area. So we couldn't shoot in LA. And so we had to go to Albuquerque, and Albuquerque is very Latin-inspired, the neighborhoods. Other than the adobe architecture there were some scenes where there was like, this was the perfect house, but to the right of it was an adobe house, and to the left of it, we were like, okay, we don't shoot that way, and we can't shoot this way, because this is really New Mexico. Like, you felt like you weren't in LA. So we're like, well, digitally erase that house. But Albuquerque was really amazing because the community, it just felt very Hispanic in a way that we really needed. The only thing about Albuquerque was we shot in like the dead of summer. Like, it was so hot, and it was still coming out of COVID, during COVID, so we had the mask, we had the shield, we had, it was so hot. And sometimes our grip trucks were so heavy, the asphalt melted underneath them because it was so hot. So we had some really hot days. But other than that, we found everything we needed in Albuquerque, and the crews were amazing. Really great crew there.
From Marilyn Rodriguez, thinking about Women's History Month, who is the woman in your life that has inspired you into action the most?
Oh, my mom, my sisters, like my family. I don't have to look far. A lot of people always have celebrity role models. I'm like, no, my mom. My mom was amazing. She had 4 girls. My oldest sister's special needs. So we were born into her world. She's like, my mother's the most selfless person. She became a special education teacher. She introduced us to volunteerism very early on in our lives. Like, my earliest memories are Special Olympics. And she had, raising 4 girls. We all went to different schools. She was a human taxi. She had a full-time job as a teacher, special needs kid that she had to take to therapy and doctor's appointments and all of this stuff. And she would always have dinner on the table at 6 p.m. every day for my dad. Like, I still don't and she did it before cell phones, before direct deposit. Like, I remember we were always at the bank. We always had to go to the bank. We had to go to the bank. Like, why are we always at the bank?
Every day.
We had to deposit money, take out money, write a check, deposit a check. I was like, oh my God. So I just look at her, and I look at my life now, and I go, I'm not doing enough. I always feel that I'm not doing enough because the bar is my mom.
And you are doing so much. It's actually... Yeah.
Ask my mom, she would say I'm not doing enough.
That actually goes into a question from Scott Marshall, which is, how do you find balance between the busyness of your everyday life and taking care of your own health, both in mind and body at the same time? Yeah, well,
I'm really lucky to have an amazing support system, starting with my family. I have an amazing husband, I have an amazing family that, we kind of just really lift each other up when I'm really busy. I had to leave town, so I called, my sister, and I was like, hey, can you be with Santi? Because I've got to go to town. And it's like, it just takes a village. It takes everybody to run your life. I have a great team, professionally as well, but it's also about prioritizing. And so, especially for women, it's like, they always, oh, can women have it all? It's like, yes, women can have it all, just not at the same time. And so prioritizing, like right now, we're doing Flamin Hot, we're gonna do this press, and then next week I have to do Casa del Sol for my tequila, I'm gonna have to do that, and then the next week, and then vacation, right? Like, okay, no, nobody's bugging me during this time, but also having like daily self-care. I work out, I meditate, I get, I love don't threaten me with a spa, because I'll be there. But it is about balance, and it's about intentional balance, because you can't just say, I need balance in my life. You have to really make the time to have that balance. Mm-hmm.
A question for you, which I always find so interesting for people who are multi-hyphenates and wear so many hats, which is, how do you handle a project when you are both starring and directing?
I prefer it. Yeah, I love telling me what to do. I prefer it because I'm a control freak. So even when I'm not directing, I just finished acting on a series for Apple, and I didn't direct. They asked me to direct. I was like, no, I just want to be a dumb actor. Like, I just want to show up and have a latte. and I find myself directing, right? I see the inefficiencies in the day. I'm like, why are they doing it this way? That's blah, blah, blah. And so in my head, I'm still directing. I'm about to go act again, and I love our director that's going to be on this project. But I already I'm like, okay, so how are you? What's the setup? So you're gonna, and I already embed myself in the process. I'm like, Eva, shut up, just act. So it's hard when I'm not doing both. Actually, I prefer to do both, but not on Flamin Hot because first there was not a role for me. I didn't hire myself, but also because it was my first film, I wanted to be 1,000% all in.
A question from Mari H. Latinidad is vast. As a Black Latina, I'm often told to choose between my Blackness and my Latinidad. How do I bring my whole identity into a room?
Yeah, that's a really good question because we have so many Afro-Latinas in our community. And I find they're just probably the most beautifully complex of all of us because they get these two worlds they get to experience, but then at the same time, this happens, right? Like you go, why do I have to choose one? And I don't know what Mari does, if she's an actress or writer, but I think it just depends what her career is. Like, how do you bring your whole identity into the room? Is like you are your identity. There's not a room I walk in that I'm not Latina. There's not a room that I walk in that I'm not a woman. But it's also how you define yourself. How do you navigate identity? And then how does that show up in your life? That's up to you. And I would say just don't dim your light on either side of that.
And to end with, I think I have to go with the most upvoted question on here from Mauricio Cantu, which is
Mauricio?
which is what toppings do you add on your elote?
My elote, this is a very important question, Mauricio. I know I like it fully loaded, like the mayonnaise, the butter, the queso fresco, the chile, the limon. I like it fully loaded with a lot of chile. But I also I'm an esquites person. I like esquites more, but okay, good. I'm gonna look you up in Corpus.
That is unfortunately all the time we have, but thank you so much for sharing your insights, and everyone go see Flamin' Hot out later this year.